Our first word in this list is affable. It means to be pleasant, to be easily approached, easy to talk to. It's a good word. You want to be with affable people. Don't want to be with jerks and people that are not friendly. So it's a good word. It comes from the Latin prefix ad and the Latin root fabulus, which meant to speak. Think of the word fable. Fable is a type of speaking, a talk handed down from generation to generation. I want to talk a little bit about that double consonant, the FF. You get that with a lot of consonants in English. When you originally had a word that started with ad and then you followed it with a consonant sound, such as P, B, T, D, K, or G. These are called occluding consonants, or F, V, S, G. These are called obstructing consonants. You can also get it with other type of consonants. There's a lot of consonants in English. It was very difficult to say add Paul, or add flick, or add test, or add brief. When you say it quickly, it becomes appall, afflict, attest, abbreviate, for example. So it became a double letter like affable rather than add fable. Anytime you see that in English, then you know that the original A-D was just shortened to A and it was followed by a double consonant, such as we have here with affable. It's a good way of learning how words are formed and a good way of learning how to remember words. Thus, affable should be paired up with the last definition on the list, friendly or amiable. Our next word is apparitional. It's an adjective form of apparition. You need to know what an apparition is. An apparition is a supernatural appearance of a person or a thing, such as a ghost. It's from the Old French, apparition, which was used in a religious terminology. And it's vaguely similar to the word appearance. If something makes an appearance and it's scary, it's an apparition. If any of you were forced to read Hamlet or other plays by Shakespeare, you'll notice that Shakespeare uses the word apparition instead of ghost often. In Hamlet, the apparition was a ghost of his. By his, I mean Hamlet's late father, who had died, was killed by his uncle. Pretty scary stuff. That should be paired up with the seventh definition down, ghostly or spectral. Again, spectral is another fancy name for a ghost. Our next word is auxiliary. It means extra, additional. It comes from the Latin almost directly, auxilium, which meant to aid or to help. Compare that to the word augment or maybe ancillary. They both are very similar origins on that. It's not a really weird word, but you do see it a lot on tests. I wanted to make sure that you saw it. It should be paired up with the sixth definition down on the list, assistant or helping. Our next word is phlegmatic. The word phlegm is something some of you might be familiar with. It's that gooky stuff that you might cough up when you have a cold. And it's the origin of the word. The word phlegmatic, though, means self-possessed, calm, or composed. How do we get from phlegm to phlegmatic? Well, the Greek word phlegmatikos meant a thick mucus, a thick body. So get the word thick, switch it to hard to move, and you switch it to being not easily moved, calm, possessed. This is a really weird twist there. It shows you the metaphorical value of words in English. It should be paired up with the ninth definition down, not easily excited to action, maybe apathetic. I think the easiest way to think about it, sluggish. Phlegm is sort of heavy and sluggish. Our next word is exorcise, not exercise, exorcise. I was almost not tempted to put this in because the word exorcism has become part of the cultural vocabulary in the last 30 years or so. It used to be a very, very technical thing that the Catholic Church used to get rid of evil spirits. But it still means that to free of evil spirits or bad influences, and it can be used metaphorically, so it doesn't really have to involve the metaphysical or the spiritual. It can be used in a very, very broad way. It comes from the prefix X, which meant out of. We've had X before. It sort of makes sense. And the Greek word, I can't really pronounce it. I'm not familiar with Greek that much. Horgizin, which meant to swear. It's very distantly related to the word exhort. And it should be paired up with the fifth definition down, to expel an evil spirit. Again, don't take that too literally. It can be used in a metaphorical sense, so you could exorcise all sorts of demons. Exercise your unquenchable thirst to make money, for example. Our sixth word is chaff. The word chaff has two distinct meanings. In one sense, it's just the bits of grain that fall off the important part of grains. So you want to separate the chaff from the grain of wheat. You don't really have very much nutrition in the chaff. It's sort of just the covering, the shell of the wheat germ. So it's that meaning, but it also means worthless matter, the refuge. The concept is chaff is something that you don't want. You want to get rid of it. So we tend to use it in that metaphorical sense more than the original word. Something like this as anything that a farmer in a 1100 would have sort of used is probably Old English. If you notice, one way of sort of guessing what's Germanic and what's Old English compared to what's Latin is things that farmers would have used 1,000 years ago would probably still be in our language today. Cow, grass, chaff, sky, those generally have a Old English version, and they're usually fairly simple words. Things that are a little bit more modern, television, computer, so forth, those are generally more of a Latin or French origin. So that's a nice rule of thumb to remember. The word chaff should be compared with the fourth definition down, worthless material. Remember, that's mostly how we use chaff today, although you still could use it in its original meaning as the stuff that covered the piece of grain. Our next word is circumscribe. It should be a fairly easy word because it comes from two easily recognized roots in English. But circumscribe means to mark off or define, to limit somehow, to circumcise the area of science, to delineate. So it obviously comes from the Latin circum, which means around, like circumference or circle, and scribe, to write around. So that would make sense there. Very important roots. That should be paired up with the second one down on the list, to enclose within bounds or to confine. Fairly easy word if you know the roots. Our eighth word is archipelago. It's a word, I don't know why it shows up on tests, because to me it was almost a technical word, but it's shown up in several tests, so I don't want you to not know it. An archipelago is just a chain of islands. For example, if you know anything about the state of Hawaii, it's composed of many islands, and they all are related to each other. It's an island chain, so it's called the Hawaiian archipelago. And the origin of that's actually an interesting origin. It's an Italian word, archipelago, which meant the Aegean Sea. And it really comes from the Greek originally, the arch part. We've had that before, which means the chief, the head, the important, the old, such as archaeology, and pelagos, which meant sea. And we actually get, in a very distant way, the word the Aegean Sea from that. The archipelago word should be paired up with the eighth word down, a chain of islands. Our ninth word is abash. Abash means that your self-confidence has been destroyed. Maybe you're disconcerted. Maybe you're ashamed. It comes from the Latin word battere, which meant to yawn or open. It's not really useful in this particular case. The best way of remembering abash is to utilize a similar word, bashful. If you were to go to bashfulness, add bash, you would become abashed. So that's a really, really good way of learning this. They're very, very similar words. It should be compared with the third definition down on the list, to bewilder or confound. Remember, if you're abashed, you will become bewildered or confounded or confused. And our final word is crux. The crux of the matter, you hear that a lot. It means a decisive point, something that is all important in making a decision. For example, you might say the crux of the trial was whether he had fingerprints on the gun. The crux of the matter is a phrase you hear a lot. It comes from the Latin crux, which means cross. You wonder how you get to something important to mean cross. It shouldn't be hard. Metaphorically, we say we come to the crossroads. We come to an important decision, so it's still used metaphorically in our everyday speech. Actually, the origin's a little bit more complicated than that, but I think that's all you really need to know in order to remember crux. Crux should be compared with the very top definition, a vital point, and that completes another 10 definitions. Thank you. I hope you enjoyed that.